Welcome to Other Lands Editing Podcast, where two speculative fiction writers and editors help you craft fantastical worlds by keeping an eye on exacting editing and foundational writing principles. Every 2 weeks, we bring you interviews with other writers, advice on editing and writers' craft pitfalls, and reviews of popular media to help you grow. So sit back, relax, and join Margaret Bates and Midnight Voss as we discuss all things writing and editing. Hi, this is Margaret Bates, and I'm here with Midnight Voss, and we are bringing you the first episode of 2026 for the Other Lands Editing Podcast, and we are talking about New Year's and, of course, the goals that come with New Year's time. So, how are you doing today, Midnight?
Not bad.
So, we made goals last year.
Right. So if you want to go back and listen to that podcast, Margaret has a lot of smart things to say about SMART goals and how to set goals realistically. So if you want to get into that detail, that's in that podcast from last year. But we mentioned a bunch of different goals at the end. So we thought we'd start by talking about what we accomplished or did not accomplish, when mostly on my part was did not accomplish. As far as our household goals, we mentioned replacing the bar in the refrigerator door, or at least fixing it. And that did not get done. And now it needs to be fully replaced because it's broken. So that's not an accomplished goal. But we did put up the exercise bike in the living room. The first thing we had to do was get rid of the chair, and then I had to put it together, and then we had it where it is. So we did accomplish some things around the house.
Yeah, we definitely did. And it was actually complicated because we had to not too inside baseball because of puppy illnesses. I have a lot of dogs in my life. It had to get delayed a couple times for just getting the chair yanked out. So getting that bike up and running was a pretty big goal because I don't think we technically accomplished it till sometime in February, but it's there. Midnight's been using it. It's been very helpful to her. So that's good. As far as obviously the writing goal side of things for 2020, going into 2025, my goals were to get not just a finished full draft of the book I was working on, The Keening, but to get that to a place where it had gone through enough subsequent drafts and editing to be published. I was aiming for indie published to begin with that overall. That did not happen. So I will admit that I did get a first draft finished and I got a reread and a significant outline on where to add scenes and like chapter by chapter or scene by scene what I wanted to add to flesh out the characters as like a road map. But I was not able to get the Keening published last year. And we had both wanted to take the workshops we've presented before. I do one on adapting fanfic ethically, and Midnight does one on adapting fairy tales to create a bigger like how-to book nonfiction on adaptations, and that we just didn't get a chance to really even touch on or do the research for in 2025. What
Yeah.
about you, Midnight? What were things that you had set to do and how'd that work out?
Listening back from our podcast last year, it was pretty clear I had no idea what I was going to work on. I just had an idea of what I should work on because you were doing the Keening. And so I thought I should also do the urban fantasy sapphic vampire slash disaster warlock that I was working on. But I didn't work on that book at all. I instead wrote like almost over 200 pages of a different book, and not at all the goal that I had planned. But I think that was in part because my goals were so nebulous to begin with that I ended up latching on to when I started getting a groove on something, it made more sense to just dig in and see how far I could get.
Yeah, which I think helped because I think, again, I also re-listened to our goals podcast to prepare for this. And it did sound like you were more nebulous and like, I want to do this, but I wasn't sure. Or I feel I should do this or obligated to do it. But obviously, with the book you are working on, Not the Hero, you felt more motivated with that. Like it came to you and then it really became something you snowballed with because you've gotten a really pretty significant chunk of the first draft written if it's already at 200
Yeah.
pages. So
And there were gaps along the way where I wasn't working on it at all until we went to the writer's retreat with the story sirens. And then I got another burst of energy that helped me move forward. And I need another burst of energy to get through the end because I really have maybe 100 pages left, but maybe not because they need to get to the ending. And so that's where I am. So I'm within the finish line. That's a good thing. If I'd been able to work on it consistency throughout the year, but I would have had it done, but that's not what happened. What did happen is that I have an almost finished s-
Yeah. Yeah,
story.
which is
Yeah,
something for sure, because at least it may not be the book you thought you were going to work on, but it's a book that is within a couple months or like a month or however your
yeah,
timing is, like a stone's throw really of getting a first full draft, which is always important because you can't edit anything till you have something on the page to work
yeah.
from.
For me, that's significant because I say this quite frequently when we're talking about writing, is that I have a bunch of different things that I hit about the 10,000 word mark where I will get a solid opening and like launch into the concept and storyline, but then I'd fizzle out. And so getting through a first draft of an original is important for me to do if I want to be doing this because I need to teach myself the process of pushing myself through it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it is okay, let's be honest. Nobody who makes New Year's resolutions is going to hit every single goal flawlessly. And I think part of what is important that we talked about in the pre-show prep was you need to look at what small steps towards an ultimate goal you made because if you said you were going to do something like, okay, the adaptation book definitely didn't get done, that was no steps made. But in your case, you wanted a draft of something finished, and yeah, it was going to be Lavender Dusk, but it ended up being two-thirds or three-quarters of not the hero. And you still were making those steps where you got into it, you wrote it, you got that burst of energy, you got through sort of the sagging middle hump as well. And I think
Yeah.
that's something to recognize. In my case, I finished the keening before my spring semester grad school started. So I basically did most of the back 60,000 words in January of 2025, but still counts. And then when I went to the retreat in March, because I always go to this writer's retreat in March in North Carolina with some writer friends of mine, I was able to at least reread the book, like sitting in one go, as if I were a reader, just sitting it down in Barnes and Noble with it, and then make notes by hand, honestly, because I literally printed it out to really simulate the reading experience. And I think that's important sometimes to get it off a screen,
Yeah.
but then was able to make those inline notes and then make a broader outline of, okay, these are the 5 or 6 or 8 character beats I need. These are extra scenes and or whole chapters that are missing that need to be engineered in because it's not fleshed out the characters enough. So they're there. That roadmap is literally there because I'm a outliner and I'm take a lot of notes. And that's just my style. So when I get time to go back to it, it's there as like a roadmap. So that's more than just saying, okay, well, I didn't publish the Keening in 2025, so I didn't accomplish anything. But no, I have a full draft. Yes, I have a roadmap of how to continue editing the first draft, and I can keep working from there. And that's something to have credit to. And also, like I said, I'm in graduate school, so I'm in the middle of working on stuff for graduate school. And one of those is in March. I'll be proposing a final project, which is a final fiction project, which is outside of what I plan to do mostly for our own business. But it intersects because while we were at the retreat together in Pennsylvania through Story Sirens in October, I started working and got through the first 2 novellas in an overall novella collection called tentatively Billionaire Buffet Eat the Rich. And so one of the stories that's a novella is the template for the expansion for my proposal to be a full novel. It's a eat the rich, we're Americans, medical insurance kind of book with horror and demons. But because I was able to go to that retreat and have the novella, I knew what I wanted to do to expand it. And as I'm crafting the proposal this next couple months, I know what worked as a novella, what doesn't quite work, what will work if I have to add in extra bones and scenes and like POVs to make it a full novel length project. So that was something that happened that was actually very helpful to me that wasn't in my goal list but help me with being where I am for saying, okay, I did this, got a draft of the key that's working. I did this. I've got something that's really towards my proposal project and a good third of another horror story collection I want to eventually get out, maybe into 2027, but something I am working on. So there are smaller steps. It's not saying it didn't happen because A, big publishing thing for like making a whole book out there didn't happen. So I did nothing for 12 months. That's not the same thing.
Yeah. And as you were saying, as we were discussing this topic of we start the new year, and a lot of people will go in with what you call black and white thinking of it will be all
Yeah.
or nothing. I have these giant goals. I'm going to change everything about myself. And if I don't succeed in the first couple of months, I quit. But it's a long year and you're always yourself. So I think what we've been learning this year, and it was my first writer's retreat when we went in the fall. So I think what we've been learning is that there are always reasons that you don't succeed at your goals. Either your goals were too big to begin with, or unreasonable for you particularly. So
Or
like
life
to say that,
happens.
or life happens. And there were a lot of medical things that happened this year. We got married this year.
Yeah.
That took a lot of time. Um,
Yes.
and so one thing that we take away from doing writers retreats now, and not everybody can drop $800 to do this, but when you go on the writers retreat, you think about how much time you spend caring and feeding for yourself and anyone around you,
Including
and how
pets.
much time that takes. And like having the peace to sit there and the permission and the impetus to do it because you paid for it, to make sure that you protect this time and you actually try to take some steps forward. And when you do that, it feels frustrating at first because I felt like I should be getting more done, but I had to do some rereading first. But once I'd done that, I was able to get past the block that I had because I did the same thing that I always do is I got them to a really important emotional point and then I stopped because I knew where they needed to go next. I just couldn't get them to go there. And part of the reason that happens, I think now, is because I get distracted with everything else around me and then I don't protect the space to sit with something long enough to figure out how I'm going to flow them into the next moment. When you're writing as a discovery writer, who will sometimes outline and sometimes not, there are a couple of things that you have to do to make sure that you keep going consistently and strongly. And one of those is reverse outlining, where you take another look at what you have and take stock of everything that's happened and leave notes to yourself, which I've done throughout this draft because I foreshadow so much that I just started taking note, like putting comments in there to make sure that I wasn't doing it too much. Then making the time that you can start thinking through and spending enough time with the characters that you can make sure that they take the next step. It's a lot of different things. It's just a different process from when you're outlining a lot at first. But the main takeaway from that little detour that I just made is that you really want to learn your own process and you want to make sure that you have things established that you can actually take the steps and make some progress toward your goals and not be mad at yourself if you don't hit all of them immediately where you want to.
Yeah, I think that's really fair because I think that's why gyms make so much money by locking you into these contracts in January that you now sometimes can't get out of until a whole year's passed because people do the black and white thinking and maybe they get as far as February or March and go, well, I didn't lose 10 pounds already. It's hopeless. And they give back up. I think a lot of industries that go around like shaping your life or changing your life or whatever buzzword you want depend on the black and white thinking, which is natural for all of us. And I think it's important to be like, not always be permissive of I let all my goals go. It's okay. But to recognize that just because you didn't hit your target exactly the way you thought you would by an arbitrary date you set up for yourself, like don't abandon it.
Yeah.
Be someone who falls prey to that black and white thinking, well, like it's not what I wanted, so now I just need to quit altogether. I think that defeats you automatically. An example of that is with our podcast. We had talked about it last year and be like, I want to have at least 100 followers of the podcast, which did not happen. Yeah, like a dozen-ish people who faithfully download. So that's
That's more than
something
I
as a
thought we
start.
had.
Yeah, but I think there are things that we've come to value with doing the podcast in a lot of ways. One is that it's given us connections to the community we are asked to go to, and we're able to do sort of coverage of the Queen Takes Bookshop and their influencer night. We made connections with other influencers that way who I still follow and will can comment on their posts on Instagram. We also were able to do that to get an interview with Harry Carpenter, the head of the Fright Reads Festival, and sort of cover that as press. And I think it has lent some credibility to our platform as well. Like I was at a book club meeting, and some people wanted to start following our podcast because I was talking about how our new tradition every year turns out to be watching Hallmark movies and rating their Christmas movies. And that's one of our podcast things. 'Cause people tend to like that episode. It's our most popular one still is that one from 2024. So it got people to be like, oh, I want to see your site. So I think the podcast gave us ways to have inroads to be asked to either be influencers at or PR reporters at local book events and book shops and get us to know more of the bookish community, especially in Howard County, because both Queen Takes Books and the Fright Reads Fest happened to be in Howard County this year. So I think that was really helpful. So we got to learn things and make connections. And then I got to learn a lot more about audio editing, which I had done a class or two out of like 15 weeks for a design class with Adobe Suite at my grad school, but I hadn't really gotten in the trenches with audio editing with Premiere, and I've gotten much more competent with it. Not amazing, but I think I've learned to be really serviceable with it and want to expand on that for video editing someday. And I know that Midnight, you've gotten some skills that the podcast has encouraged in you
Yeah.
too.
I mean, I've already had some graphic design skill. I'm going to be honest, like most of it is
Yeah.
self-taught because I had Adobe back when it was just Adobe One. And so just me as a millennial tooling around with stuff until it looks right. So that's my training. But I got used to Canva. That's one something as I didn't really use it prior to that, which means I was probably putting in more effort than I needed to doing things. There's a lot of things that are already there for me. So, and then I can get a template of something that I put together and then just replace the images, which makes it a lot faster. So I have that, and I should probably do some more education of myself in Adobe for new features and type settings. But it has given me some additional things to work with. I think it also has given us a lot of space to discuss our ideas about things that we've done mostly in classes where we're just trying to teach people things, but a lot of the classes have been discussion board based, which means it's just us trying to come up with a way to make it attractive enough on the page so that people will read it and then do some of the exercises, which means we're not like hashing it out as well as we could.
And
Um,
not a real time discussion where you get that type of input when you're talking back and forth and
yeah,
soundboarding. Yeah, and I will, you're modest, but I also, even if it's mostly with Canva or some of them are from templates, I really enjoy your thumbnails. They're very pretty. So like we both have learned a lot from doing the podcast and we'll work on obviously trying to get more people. We'll talk about more of the goals for the podcast later,
we should
but
probably do
it's been
more of the
useful.
video stuff. We're just both like
Yeah.
we don't like to put our face on things because we grew up in the era of the internet will kill you. But
Well, also I think maybe if I could just do like, here's a photo of here's a short video of Bean or Homie doing Bean or Homie things, and here's some writing advice over that or something. But I don't know, because I think our pets are
I'll
very
try to
cute.
lure
I get
Homie into
nervous.
traps with a box with some books in it to get her.
So I think that kind of leads us to what our goals are for the coming year, as far as first our writing goals, but then we'll also talk about any personal reading goals and any business goals. So, what are some of your writing goals for this coming 2026 midnight?
Okay, so well, now that I know what book I'm working on, and you know that I'm pretty close to finishing it, the main thing here is that I need to get that book finished. So realistically, if I can get some butt in chair time, then I should be able to finish the actual words on page by the end of February. And my aim is to get you a draft to look at by mid-March because that's when we have spring break. So then you can give me some developmental notes on what's going there. Because of the way I write it, I am editing throughout and I reread it so many times. So I'm hoping to have something that looks like a finished draft by midsummer. And then if I'm pleased with it, then I will proceed forth to do other things and like get it ready to go. If I'm not, then I'll do another draft of it. But that's mostly for the books. I don't have second books that I'm currently writing, but My other writing goal really is to do some more substantial research on fairy lore because I have multiple books where that will be relevant, and I'd like to be able to have distinct world building for each one of them. If that works out well, then I might be able to take notes on outlines for some of the other projects.
That would
So
be very nice.
to set myself up where I can move forward on other projects when I get the first part, because Not the Hero is going to end up being a duology. I'm going to fight really hard to keep it as a duology and not any longer than that, because these boys don't need to be tortured any longer than I've already tortured them. And also, a lengthy series as a debut seems unwise for me, particularly. But those are my major writing goals right now.
Yeah, for me, I am going to get through the Keening and revise it, get it to midnight to look at. I would really like to get it to shape with subsequent editing work where it is something I might be able to publish. I really would like to get it published, indie published, so that I can have it. My real big goal is to like go to Fright Reads as an exhibitor, which is usually like the last week or so of September into October. It's the last couple of years has been September. So like mid to late September of 2026, have the Keening as a physical edition, as well as obviously online. So I can go to Fright Reads and be able to have that as part of the booth and sell and stuff. Similarly, the adaptation book, I'm sort of combine that with other things in that I have to do for school essentially a presentation for a small women's writing conference this January, and it intercedes with fandom. And since some of that intercedes with like what fanfic is, i.e., killing two birds with one stone, I'll have to do the research for part of the adaptation book and my part on fanfic this January for something else, like having that midpoint or those interstitial goals of like if I get this done, then that's going to go into the intro explanation of my part of the fanfic as adaptation in the adaptation book, but then really getting it done over the summer. So hopefully it can also be a nonfiction book to offer at Fright Reads and to, if we can get into the Maryland Writers Association conference as well, be a nonfiction how to write book that we can offer. And then I'm picking at something that was an accidental project where I have this thing called Van Helsing Academy that's a vampire book that I
Yeah.
pitched too early at Savvy Authors, but I'm still working at that in bits and starts. But the priority is with the Keening and then adaptation book and whatever needs to get done with my proposal at grad school, which kind of is nice in that it feeds into some of the Eat the Rich horror novellas I'm working on, which may not be something that happens full force until 2027 because Keening and adaptations first. And then as far as being readers, because I know reading is so important to being a writer, what about you, Midnight?
I have some series that I've started that I would really like to push myself to finish this year. I've bounced off the second book in the Locked Tomb series like 3 times now, and it's because I didn't have the Dead Tree copy in front of me. It's hard to audiobook the second one because there's so much that book is gaslighting you as to what happened in the first book, and there are names crossed out, and you just can't get it that way. So I'm going to end up rereading Gideon the Ninth, then actually get through Harrow the Ninth, and then hopefully I'll be able to catch up on the series. There's the Shades of Magic series, which I've started and read a good component of, but not finished. There are a couple of other series. So I'd like to finish a couple of series that I've started and keep going with more of the modern fantasy because it's helpful to read widely. And we'll see what else I can pick up that are in all like different genres as well.
For me, my friend Deanna from school runs this group where you do like a reading challenge. And it's like a list of so many books you're supposed to types of books, like, oh, a book written by a BIPOC author, a book that
Yeah.
involves wizards or whatever. In her case, there's 104 prompts. And I'm not going to read two books a week because I'm in grad school, but I
No.
do hope to use that as a way to read at least one book a month that is help me be like, oh, it's out of my comfort zone because it's, asking you to read a book set in Vermont or whatever. I think for me, that's something I would like to do to make sure I read more consistently outside of stuff I read just for the Cornell and Columbia Book Club, which is usually romance based, and also just from whatever I have to read for clients. So I am embracing that as a challenge to be like, okay, this year, once a month for 12 months, I'm going to read something from that list. So it gets me out of the groove as much as sometimes I might get into where I'm like, oh, this will fit it, but it's not my usual wheelhouse because I think that's important to also read more out of my wheelhouse. And
Cool.
then, yeah, so finally we have what we hope to do business-wise with other lands. So, I mean, I'll go first with definitely say that we are going to be speaking at the Mid-Atlantic Romance Writers Conference in the 20th of February. So that's going to be going out and doing a conference. I'd like to, when the solicitation for panels opens, put our hat in for the Maryland Writers Association again. We spoke there in 2024, and I'd love to do it again if the timing works out. And there's some other goals that you had as well, Midnight.
Yeah, we sort of started, and it did start with the Queen Takes Book thing. We started our little bookstore tour of the area where we would try to get out and take pictures of local bookstores, connect that with events if we could. And it was in part just to do something outside of our ordinary and get some pictures for the gram. But it's been fun. And our latest one was at the Word bookstore where we did the little tea for two thing. And I think the next one we're doing at the Friends to Lovers bookstore. So I'd like to continue doing our bookstore tour as part of the ongoing things for the Instagram where we have our regular podcast, but then we have these little bookstore check-ins, book events, bookish stuff in the area.
Yeah, it was fun to do the tea at the weird bookstore, but also get pictures for them because being a tea shop is also part of their aesthetics. They had cute little displays of teacups and like literal like tea pots made of china for sale. So that was really fun. We happen to be fortunate to live in an area where we're sort of between DC and Baltimore, and so we can go to a bunch of different types of places because there's just areas that tend to have a lot of bookshops. So we definitely want to take advantage of that. I would love to, while we're still on vacation for the interim between semesters, go to Friends to Lovers Bookshop in Alexandria because it's not
Yeah.
super convenient to drive to Northern Virginia when you don't have a pocket of time to do it. So that's something on my to-do list. And then we had one other thing we're trying to start up starting the 31st of January. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because it was your brainchild, Midnight.
Yeah, it was my off the cuff brainchild that we've quickly turned into a thing. One issue that we've found is that we've been talking about the little steps that you take in order to make your goals happen, is that it doesn't happen in one chunk. You can't do an all-nighter and write a book. You have to do it in pieces. And writing groups wherein you are encouraged to take the time and write. Not again, not everyone can pay $800 or more for a retreat, but you can join writing groups. But writing groups can also be very loosely based, and problematically, you might show up and no one else is there. So our thought was that with our little platform, we might be able to have a standing writing group at a local library, to hold a structured writing group where people will be able to in the area come and know that we'll be there, and we'll have to be there because we're running it, so that means that we will definitely work on our stuff now that it's going to be at a library in Edgewater, right?
Yeah, it will be just because they seem to have the consistent Saturday hours for like a modest sized conference room. So 10-ish people, which to start with, if we can get two or three besides us consistently is just the big goal to get that
Yeah.
accountability. Because you're right, a lot of writers groups you'll show up, but because it's more like friends or people who are sort of getting to know each other, there isn't always that consistency because you don't know if people are going to be there every week or every couple weeks, and that's harder to get it going, I think I've
Yeah,
found.
and if you don't know for sure people are going to be there, then it's not really giving you that external pressure. The thing that you're doing where you have added a sort of conference that you have to do the work for the adaptation research, that's a really smart thing to do, because having external pressures to tell you, I need to have X done at this point, that's what's going to keep you motivated. So if you know that you need to be this place in the library at this time because this is happening and these people are running it, then there is a little bit of additional pressure to do it within the structured writing group. I'm hoping that we can also do a little bit of talking about smaller discussion issues, but it depends on how many people show up. So if we did get enough people the first time, Margaret could go ahead and talk about the SMART goals and setting goals, and then they could sit and write their list or just write. And so give them the option to work on something specific, maybe once a month, since we're thinking about doing this twice a month. Once a month, have a little topic where they can take that time to work on that or write.
Yeah. But I think a lot of it is being that goal of a couple times a month, getting that what I call the by chalk, the button share, hands-on keyboard, because it helps us too. But I think being able to, if there is enough of a interest of consistent people coming, to be like, oh, here's a little writer's topic we could talk about. Say, full disclosure, when I used to run a writers group over a decade ago that was young adult fantasy focused and like speculative fiction focused, I would sometimes be like, oh, here's a really cool thing to know about writing, or here's a little something the editors say about query letters or
Yeah.
whatever. So sometimes I like when you can get a little knowledge out of it and then get, okay, we're all sitting here writing together as a support system. And I guess that kind of wraps us up for our goals. I think that we thought that in like June or July, we'd check back in and honestly look at each other and say, like, okay, where after half a year have our goals been met? Which I think goes along with the incremental steps and then checking in and readjusting. And so I guess you guys will know in about 6 to 7 months how sticking with these goals and getting progress towards what we want to do in 2026, how that's going. So is there anything else you want to add before I sign us out, Midnight?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. Well, my biggest advice is be gentle with yourselves with New Year's goals as far as you're right. You can't just be a new you because you're always going to be fundamentally yourself. And don't do black and white thinking. So if the minute you feel like you didn't succeed, you just
Yeah.
quit altogether, because I don't think that'll just make you feel more defeated than if you'd never set a goal at all. So until then, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. So thank you for listening to the Other Lands Editing Podcast. Thank you for joining the Otherlands Editing Podcast. Look for our next episode coming soon, and in the interim, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want more information or want to connect, you can find Margaret Bates and Midnight Voss at our site, Otherlands Editing. Until next time, keep writing and keep refining your words.